Okay. So, what I really want to talk about is your learning and development program a business strategy? And by business strategy, I mean, I talk to hundreds of HR people all the time and, executives and companies. And what I learned is our learning and development is a perk. And what we really need is learning and development to be a business strategy that grows the employees, that has impact on the business, and I think really importantly, that's equitable and inclusive in the way that we do it. And so, just a bit of background. The way we invest in learning and development today is broken. And, it results in top talent leaving. The number one reason individuals leave their jobs is lack of development. And when you invest in someone, they're actually likely to stay twice as long. And money is being lost because it costs between 30 to 200% of someone's base salary to replace them. And to give you the stats, it's 30% for a junior employee, 150% for a mid-level employee, and 200% for a senior employee. And that's above base salary. So it costs us a lot of money when someone leaves and we have to replace them. And then we have this other issue that skills gaps are growing. 43% of companies are already reporting that they feel the skills gap, and another 44%, it's almost 100%, together know that this is coming in the next 5 years. And to me, the craziest stat I've found in all my research of all of this is that Korn Ferry is reporting that by 2030 in the US alone, there's going to be $8.5 trillion of unrealized revenue in the US alone. And so, there's multiple things we're dealing with here. One is we want to make sure individuals have the skills that they can keep gainful employment, and hopefully that employment's also meaningful, but also we want companies to succeed. Oops. Apologize, the screen's moving there we go. And so companies today don't have the tools they need to get it right. So first of all, and this sort of blows my mind that this is how we operate. We know what we hire people to do, but we don't actually know what they can do. And this stems from partly the way we write job descriptions. If you're going out to hire a marketing manager, what are you going to do? You're probably going to Google marketing manager job description. You're going to pull from 4 to 6 that you like, and then you're going to hire for what you put in that job description without ever really thinking about, what are the actual skills I need? Do I need someone who's good at digital marketing? Do I need someone who's good at in-home marketing? Do I need someone who knows how to do copywriting? We don't think about that. We just try to write these salesy job descriptions. We're only equipped for learning and development to be a perk and not a strategy. Most companies have learning and development budgets. Every employee has, let's say, $500 a year, and then they can go learn what they want. But then what happens, and I'll use an extreme example, is someone goes out and learns to play guitar. Then they come back and they're like, oh, all excited, and they want to play guitar for the company. And of course, as a company, you're like, but we don't want anyone to play guitar. And now you have an employee who's frustrated. They wasted their time, you've wasted your money, and no one's really winning. To keep layering, we don't have the right tools to assign work to those who have the right skills. So in most companies I've worked in, extra tasks and projects pop up. They go to the same 2 or 3 people every time because those individuals will deliver. But how about everyone else who wants those opportunities because it's exposure to new teams or leadership or working on interesting projects? Instead, we just give it to the few people, and we never really think about using work as a development opportunity. We just think about getting work done. And finally, we don't have the structure in place to move people from lower impact to higher impact roles. So an example of that would be, I was talking to one of the big 5 accounting firms, and they were talking about how they have so many people working in audit, but what they need is so many people working in cybersecurity. And so what's the path for someone who's in audit to get to cybersecurity? Because in fact, there's a lot of transferable skills. And, we're living in a time where this laser focus on skills and job design is really required. And so I just want to talk a little bit about how we got here, and then I'll move on to, let's say some more interesting information about what you can do. So first of all, automation. Back in 2007, the World Economic Forum and Oxford Economics predicted that 45% of jobs were going to be eliminated due to automation. And then that's just how we lived our lives, expecting this to happen. But this isn't what happened at all. And so you combine that with AI and then the digital acceleration that came with the pandemic. And the skills for any one job have changed by about 25% in the last 7 years. And that's supposed to double in the next 5. And so even if your people are staying in their jobs are changing, and upskilling and reskilling is still going to be required. And then we're moving into this period of slower growth. We're in a recession, or I'll say a perceived recession. And we want to be productive. We want to be efficient. We want to have these leaner teams. But how can you really do that if you don't understand the skills of the people and you're not giving people skills that the company needs at the same time? And, how are jobs changing? So these repetitive tasks that we do, this is what's getting eliminated with automation and AI. And it's the varied work that's, growing at 25x the speed of the non-repetitive work. So what type of stuff is that? Sales is a great example. Chat GPT or any of these tools can write a sales email for you, but they can't personalize it for the client. They can't get on the meeting and read the person on the other end of probably the screen, maybe the phone, maybe the table. You need humans to do that. So these tasks that are varied and require human touch, they're growing really, really fast. And, what are the emerging skills? You'd think it was technical skills, but it's really your softer skills. Critical thinking, adaptability is huge because things are changing so fast. Digital literacy, I'd say this is, an obvious one. Leadership, teamwork, ability to learn. But the number one skill that's in demand, does anyone have a guess? You can put it in the chat, although I don't think I can see the chat while I'm sharing the screen. But maybe you can let me know.
Yeah, I can read it for you.
Yeah. Does anyone have a guess at what the number one skill is that's in demand right now?
Somebody says resilience.
Resilience. No, but actually that was on this list. And I had to pick. So close.
I will jump. I would say critical thinking.
Well, that's up here. Number one is communication.
Okay.
This is the number one skill that's in demand right now. And so, the bad news is we're not ready for this, but, the good news is you can change it. And that's what we're going to get into now. So, companies and their people should grow together. So the first 2 things you need to make this happen are skills profiles and role architecture. And what do I mean by that? I said at the beginning that we understand what we hired people to do, but we don't actually understand what they can do. And so skills profiles involve knowing the skills someone has and the proficiency they have in those skills. And there's different ways you can do it. The most basic way of doing it is, and if you don't have a tool, this is the way you may have to do it. You can associate 20 or 25 skills with a job title, and then you can make that someone's skills profile based on their job title. Now, it won't be as accurate, but it's a good place to start. If you are able to get a tool, which is what I recommend, skills profiles can go from looking at job experience, education, and I think it's really important that you also look at volunteer experience and life experience. With volunteer experience, we don't all have the same networks or opportunities, let's say when we graduate. So someone who wanted to be in sales may go and do fundraising for a charity. And why, as an organization, would you not want to leverage skills someone's so passionate about that they went and volunteered to gain them? And of course, that individual also wants to use those skills. So it's a win-win. And to me, life experience is also one of the most important. How do you level the playing field? For example, for someone who spent 4 years in university, paid for by their parents, and someone else who was maybe battling homelessness with their family. And, each of those people definitely gained skills during that time, and both should be able to bring those skills to the workplace. The next is role architecture, which really is a fancy way of saying skills profiles for roles. So as I mentioned, you have these job descriptions. Do they accurately reflect what you need someone to do in a job? You really need to go through and look at, what are the must-have skills, or I like to call them should have, because there's rarely real must. So, what are the skills someone should have? What are the skills that's nice for someone to have? And what are sort of these bonus skills? Make sure you set the proficiency. And from there, you can do your skills gap analysis. And this, again, is not the way we tend to think about learning and development. Even at the individual level, when I think about my own growth and development, I only really feel it if I'm getting promoted or I'm making a lateral move into a new area that I want to be in. But growth should really look like, which skills have I upskilled? Which new skills have I gained? Because if you're not doing that, then getting a new job title is not really growth. It's just that. It's a new job title, and maybe you're not going to even succeed because you didn't do the skill development work to get there. And so I think it's so important that we help people succeed and thrive in their existing roles before we look at where is this individual going to move. And so when you have skills profiles for people and for roles, it's really easy to see where the upskilling and skill gaps exist. And then you can work to closing those. And then skill discovery. I spoke about assigning work in an equitable and inclusive way. If you're using the right tool, or you're a master at Excel and can do it that way, then when a task or project pops up, you can actually go in and search and see who matches the skills. So instead of giving it to those same 2 or 3 people, you can now look to other individuals. And not only are you assigning work to people who actually have the skills to get it done, so it's more efficient and productive for the organization, it's just a more equitable and inclusive way to distribute work. And if you are collecting skills goals in skills profiles, which is something I'd recommend doing, then you can actually now assign work to someone who has expressed interest in learning a skill, and you're using work as a development opportunity, which doesn't even cost money. You don't need any, learning management system or e-learning licenses. You can just use work. Next is mentorship. I think it can be hard to run a mentorship program, but if you've got the skills profiles of everyone, along with the proficiency and their skills goals, it can now become simplified to match people who want to learn skills with someone who has those skills. And again, this is not just a great way of upskilling people without having to invest in external dollars in learning if you don't have them. It's also a great way to build up leadership, because when you're mentoring someone, you develop those leadership skills. You develop sometimes the presentation skills, the confidence. It's a really, really win-win for everyone involved. And finally would be learning and career paths. So learning and career paths are similar but different. I would say the career paths are more employee driven. So it allows me as an employee to chart my way through an organization. So maybe I started in customer service and I don't want to stay in customer service, but I want to grow my career within the company. And so it would allow me to look at what would it look like if I was a customer service supervisor? What would it look like if I wanted to jump to marketing? And you can do this as a paper exercise, or the right tool can help people see what are the skills I need to gain, maybe what are the promotions I'd need to gain to get there. Our tool, for example, allows you to path whatever you want. So you can be a junior financial analyst and you can path yourself towards CFO, and we'll say, okay, great, here's the 7 promotions, here's the different routes you can take to get there, here's the skills, and people can really understand what they're in for. And it's a great level set for employees. And this is part of what's going to contribute to retention, because they won't feel as, I don't want to say deserving, it's not the right word, but you won't feel as entitled to getting these next roles because you understand and see the work that you need to get done to get there. This is also why the skills gap analysis is so important, because when people see where the gaps are in their existing role, they're less likely to expect that next role. And they're more likely to feel valued as you can show them, we've invested in you gaining 20 new skills and upskilling in 12 skills. That's the feedback we've received so far. And then learning paths are created by the organization. So this is repeatable training. It could be onboarding, it could be mandatory compliance training, but it could be, this is the path for anyone who's going from, digital marketing coordinator to digital marketing manager, or from junior front-end developer to intermediate front-end developer. You can create paths, and you can either assign them to people with a specific title, or you can let employees register in them on an as desired basis. And so expected results. So number 1 is a more equitable and inclusive culture. And what I've seen over my career is 2 things. 1, Well, I'll say three things, but it's really like 1, A and B and 2. So the first is you work in a company that everyone has their own budget for learning and development. And maybe everyone has $500 a year, you put it as a perk, it's on your hiring website, you use it to attract people, but you don't actually have a corresponding budget line. And so what happens is nobody really gets training because you don't really want to spend that money. And the only people who get trained are those who maybe had a more privileged background and know how to get what they want. Or maybe you do have that corresponding budget line and you have a bunch of people who are going out and taking training, but none of it's relevant to what the company needs. And so you've wasted money, you've wasted time, and you've still lost those individuals. The second, I worked for the Bank of Montreal prior to joining Tiller, and I had a 6-figure learning and development budget. I had about 400 people on my team, but no one actually got any training except, again, these people who know how to get around process and get what they want. Why? Because my boss would give it to me and I'd give it to my directors and they'd give it to their senior managers and they'd go ask their people what they wanted to learn. And by the time it got, back up to the top for approval, the year would be over and that budget would go out the window. And so because if you do this in the right way, and especially with the right platform, there's the employee driven piece and there's the top down piece. And when you do it that way, there's much more equal access for everyone to get the learning and development that they want. And then, the second is the investment results in impact. And I think this is most important. I've been a little surprised by this, but in talking to so many people in HR and leadership, companies are terrified to tell people what they should be learning and developing. And I think we have this perception that if we tell people what they should be learning and developing, that they're going to leave because they want to learn and develop what, they're passionate about. But the truth is, we don't always know where we want to be until we end up there. And so the much better thing to do is align the goals of your employees with the needs of the business, because learning and development only takes place if someone goes out and learns something and then comes back and uses those skills and develops. And so if you don't have those opportunities waiting when someone finishes, e-learning or, a continuing ed course, then they're not actually developing. And more importantly, of course, the investment is to help employees grow, but the company should also be seeing more impact from those employees. And by impact, I don't mean more hours or overworking people. Of course, that's not it, but it's about dropping the lower value tasks for the higher value tasks that are also more interesting to that employee. And then everyone wins. And then from there, you're, of course, going to have increased employee happiness and retention. And, I really should touch on the culture of learning. And, unfortunately, there's no way around this. Your culture of learning comes from the top. If your leaders are not showing that they take time for their own learning and development, whether it's, telling their team that they listen to a podcast on their way to work, or, sharing at a town hall, I read this book and I thought this advice was really good, or even blocking in their calendar, Fridays from 9 to 11, that is my time to go online and do my e-learning. It's very hard to have a culture of learning, and your employees will rarely feel like you want them to spend time investing in themselves. And so make sure that culture of learning is coming from the top, and then you're going to get that employee happiness and you will get that retention. As I mentioned, people stay twice as long if you invest in their learning and development. And then you can understand the skills that are successful in certain roles and hire more of them. And, there's so many ways you can do this. I don't know if any of you have ever been through a stack ranking where you rank people A, B, C, and then the people who are C are on the chopping block. Well, I've been through that in companies before, and I always look around and I think to myself, we didn't lay off low performers. We laid off junior people. And, I'd suggest if you're stack ranking, you should also do a skills comparison, because now you can see the skills of your higher performers and the skills of your lower performers. And maybe your lower performers are performing low because you haven't set them up for success and properly invested in them. And so instead of laying someone off, invest in that person and, help them build their career and help them be more successful. And then once you know what's successful in a role, hire more. You want to get the right people. And, I have to mention it. I know we're talking more about learning and development than hiring, but because this is, talking about newcomers, I think that skills-based strategies are so important, because I know so many newcomers who come here And our job descriptions in North America are whack. We have crazy job titles like sales ninja or chief apricot officer. Like, how is anyone supposed to know which job to apply for? It's so confusing. And I always make it a point to talk to my Uber drivers, and I can't tell you how often it's someone who is so skilled, but didn't understand, or wasn't, I shouldn't even say that, the blame's not on them, wasn't given the right tools to be able to figure out which jobs they're a match for. And then on the other end, companies also don't understand. And so when you start looking at skills only, it opens up many doors for many different groups of people. And, cost savings. I think this is, a big one. You lose less people. It costs you less money to replace them. You're outsourcing less because you can now do things internally. And you can, if you're running one of these programs where everyone's just going out and learning whatever they want, you can easily spend less money because you're now only investing in people's development if that development is directly aligned to the business. And so you're spending less, but you're gaining more. And so it works out nicely for everyone. And yes, that is everything. I would love to answer some questions from people. And also, I share a lot of content and tips on LinkedIn. So if you're interested, feel free to send me a connection request.